In this presentation, we will be discussing the implementation of electronic health records for Maplewood Health and Rehabilitation Center. This presentation is presented by Kimberly Bigashevitz. The first thing that we're going to look at is the needs of Maplewood Health and Rehabilitation Center. These needs include the need for increased communication, the need for the improved quality of care, the need for easier access, and the need for security measures and protection of protected health information. The focus of this quality improvement project of implementation of an electronic health record system will be Maplewood Healthcare and Rehabilitation Center. The facility is a 180-bed skilled nursing facility that has both short-term and long-term patients within its population. This particular healthcare facility is located in Orlando, Florida, and is under the guidance and regulations of the Agency for Healthcare Administration, AHCA, and the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare, JCAHO. Skilled nursing facilities are responsible for the care and oversight of their patients with providing services such as nursing and rehabilitation services. This proposed quality improvement plan for the above-mentioned healthcare organization is successful implementation of the electronic health record system, along with the quality of care enhancements that will come along with the implementation of such software. The facility feels that implementing electronic health records will allow for increased communication between the nurses and practitioners, as well as increased communication and collaboration of care and services with the patient. In increasing communication of the patient plan of care, it ultimately leads to increased quality of care. It has been determined that implementation of electronic health record systems have improved access to patient information and that ultimately improves in the quality of care to the patients. It has been noted in research that utilization of electronic health records have improved the ability to diagnose patients as well as reduce and possibly prevent medical errors, which in turn improves on quality of care. EHR systems not only maintain the records of the individualized patients, but allows for the capability to establish alert notifications for potential allergies, medication interactions, and other complications. Having the medical records of the patient at the practitioner's fingertips will allow for quicker access to their health information and thus allow the medical team to make adjustments to the patient's plan of care rather quickly, averting any potential mishaps or complications. It also allows for the practitioner to have the medical history of the patient at his or her fingertips and be able to review this information when implementing future care and services, even if the patient is unconscious and unable to provide that information directly. EHR systems allow for identification of potential operation concerns and identify areas of improvement so that a plan can be implemented rather quickly. Electronic records have the ability to provide the practitioner with alerts and reminders of when the plan of care of the patient needs adjustment and allows for a greater opportunity to review diagnostic information and thus improve on decision making of the practitioner that ultimately improves on patient outcomes and care. Having the medical record at the practitioner's fingertips allows for them to truly get a comprehensive view of the patient's condition, thus implementing interventions that truly meet the individualized needs of the patients. The system also allows for safeguards to be put into place that prevent the possibility of an adverse event which could ultimately lead to poor outcomes for the patient. As clearly outlined above, moving away from paper medical records and implementing the electronic healthcare system improves on the quality of care. There is also a need for easier access to medical records and patient information. By instituting the EHR system, the practitioners will have access to the medical records right at bedside. In addition, with implementation of remote access, the practitioners will be able to take call and address patient needs outside of the facility, thus providing a continuity of care. Components of the healthcare decision-making model. In this slide, we will look at the 7 phases of SDLC: the planning stage, the system analysis, the system design, the development phase, and the implementation and testing phase. Within the SDLC, there are 7 different phases that help with the acquisition and implementation of an IT project and would be beneficial for the implementation of an EHR system in a long-term care facility. The first phase is the planning stage, which allows the organization to determine if there is a need for the implementation of the EHR system in order to enhance their business strategies. This is also the stage where there's a determination of resources needed for the implementation and the way in which the organization will obtain these resources. This is where the organization determines any problems that may occur throughout the process and the way in which the organization will overcome them. All allotted resources, costs, time, and benefits of the EHR implementation should be considered at this point in the implementation plan. The next key step is system analysis and requirement, where the organization will determine the functional requirements for developing and implementing an electronic health record system. This is where an organization will take into consideration the users that will be using the EHR system and whether or not it will successfully meet their needs for the delivering of quality of care to the patients that they serve. The timeline for implementation will be established during this phase. The third step is system design, where the software will be analyzed and the needs of the organization will be met with utilization of this software. The determination of the best EHR systems to be used based on the organizational need will be within this planning stage. Stage 4 is the development stage. This is where the engineer, staff, or software programming review the EHR software to determine that it will do what the organization needs it to do. This is where training in its infancy stage occurs with those who will be using the EHR system. Stage 5 is the integration and testing phase that is usually overseen by the quality assurance team, where the software is assessed to determine that the software created truly does meet the facility's need and that it will be functional to carrying out the care and services of the resident. Any errors or bugs in the system will be worked out during this phase. Stage 6 is implementation. This is where the EHR software is put into place within the organization. This is where the data is transferred from paper charting to the formal electronic chart and records. Lastly, Stage 7 is the operations and maintenance phase, where any required routine maintenance and monitoring are performed. This is where any detailed changes or updates can be made to truly meet the needs of the healthcare organization. Utilizing the steps of the SDLC allows for a well thought out planned implementation of the electronic record, which allows for a smoother transition and less resistance from users. Next, we will discuss risk analysis of the organization and adherence with applicable laws. In this slide, we will discuss HIPAA, HITECH, adherence to the law, and penalties for breach of the law. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, also known as HIPAA, is an act that is put into place in order to safeguard protected health information of patients to ensure that information does not end up in the hands of wrong people. This law was put into place back in 1996. Most recently, the act has been expanded on with the implementation of HITECH in 2009, which included more specifics to electronic medical records. It is important for the skilled nursing facility to understand those that will have access to the electronic health record system and what information they will have access to. It will need to be determined if certain positions need restricted access to some of the protected health information. It is important for the organization administration to ensure that the protected health information is not used in any way that is in violation of federal and state laws and regulations. Education would need to be provided to the staff members that includes an inappropriate use of protected health information that violates company and federal state standards and repercussions of doing so. It is important for the organization to ensure that employees are aware that failure to follow HIPAA and/or HITECH guidelines can result in fines to the individual who breaches them and disciplinary action up to and including termination. Impact that technology has on cultural factors in healthcare provisions and decision making. Within the slide, we will look at the system's usability scale, ensuring staff competency and ease, and follow-up with staff and progress. The system usability scale is a quick reference tool that allows for an organization to assess the usability of software that they are looking to implement and to also get an idea of where the current employee stands in terms of their usage knowledge and comfortability with IT programs. This tool is a 10-question survey with 5 responses for the user to choose from, ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. This has become a popular tool to utilize items like EHR rollouts because it is very easy for potential users to answer and understand and doesn't necessarily have to be used on a large population for it to be successful. It has also been known to be reliable in that it has been proven to be accurate in determining whether or not the software will be usable in the environment that it is being rolled out in. The only challenge with utilizing ASUS is that when scoring it, the scoring is difficult, and those utilizing the scores need to remember that the scores obtained are not in a percent. The way in which the results need to be interpreted is by creating a percentile ranking scale. This is important on the proposed acquisition of implementation of an EHR system, and that it will allow an organization to create a percentile ranking scale. This is important and the needs and ensure that it meets the needs of the organization and in turn allows for increased compliance with utilizing the system competently. It is important to take into consideration the level of comfortableness and competency in using the electronic health records system. Culture can play a factor in that, depending on the culture and age group. They may not be familiar with utilizing technology. It is essential for the organization to ensure a competent training plan and on-site assistance to ensure compliance with use and accessibility of the information. It is important for the organization to follow up with staff members and perform competencies to ensure that they are able to access and utilize the system with ease. The next slide, we will discuss the roles and responsibilities of key players in strategic planning and continuous quality improvement. We will look at identification of super users, identification and research on the best software company, identification of equipment needs, assessment of the working environment, and determination of equipment needs for successful implementation, as well as determination of systemic rollout. Identification of super users and thus the creation of the EHR implementation team will be who set forth the objectives and goals, with the end result of the organization being completely electronic in terms of medical record keeping. Identification and research on best software companies will determine the needs of the organization and the cost on the organization to implement such software. Identification of equipment needs will look at the cost of adding the type of equipment needed to the organization. Assessment of the working environment will determine the equipment needs for successful implementation. Determination of a systemic rollout or rolling out the system in its entirety will need to be established. Training of the staff that will be utilized in the system, as well as completing staff assessments of their technological competencies, will need to occur. The implementation team will meet at minimum twice weekly to discuss progress and determine any changes needed to the plan to ensure successful implementation. Any challenges faced will be addressed with a root cause analysis of the situation and the ways in which the institution can institute quality improvements to the plan. In the next slide, we will be looking at enterprise-wide data's role in health information governance. We're going to be looking at the limitations of enterprise data in terms of the compromising of PHI, security breaches, risk for HIPAA violation, and risks of the individual employee. Limitations of the enterprise-wide data is that the risk of security breach and protected health information of patients getting into the wrong hands and being shared with people that should not have access to that information. A potential breach in security could cost a loss of revenue that is astronomical. It is estimated that a security breach can cost an organization upwards of $3.7 million. While implementing data systems into a healthcare organization can prove to be beneficial in that it increases the access to health information and thus improves the quality of care, the risk for security breach is still high, and the organization needs to ensure that there are plans to prevent this. Implementing security systems in the beginning of a rollout will save the organization a large sum of money by reducing the risk of breach in HIPAA. Some potential threats that lie within an organization would be individual employee mistakes that can lead to disclosure of protected health information. This can happen simply by accident by means of sending an email to the wrong address, leaving protected patient-sensitive information up on a computer screen for those to see that should not have access, etc. Another way in which a security breach can occur is when an employee or someone on the inside uses protective information about someone for their own personal gain, or can potentially be a disgruntled employee that is breaching security measures out of spite for something that may have occurred to them, like disciplinary action. In addition, there's potential for a cyber attack where persons have mastered being able to hack into computer systems to gain sensitive information for their own personal gain.